you told me that at some point you wanted to expand into your own business, and you didn't really want to work as an engineer in terms of in a job. You also said that your parents kind of wanted you to study to get a job, right? So I know there's a lot of young people that they see their vision, they see their potential, but or like they see where they want to go, but maybe their parents don't see it yet, or their guardians don't see it yet. How would like a young person who has a vision or a goal, and their parents may see it differently, or their guardians may see it differently, how would they even broach a conversation with their parents, or how would they get around that type of anxiety, you know?
Look, I would wish this question I would have asked my parents sometime to answer for me. At what point were they ever convinced with what I was doing? Because at no point I was ever employed. But one of the wise men always says to me, you can never argue with the results. So I guess at some point when they saw the results of what I was doing and what I was able to achieve, it was quite obvious that, I mean, perhaps I'm in the right direction, you know. Because I don't think also, coming from the generation of my family, anyone has ever done what I've done, you know. Everyone in my family works for someone, or works for a government, or works for an institution. So I almost broke ranks of what is known to this person is working for himself. How is it possible? But because I could support myself, I could, you know, do things that were visible, support my family. It was clear that this person, there's something that is doing that is right. But I don't think they ever really understood, or I ever understood, if they understand, what really is it that I really put myself to, you know. But I would say for a young person, you always have to approach parents as much as try to have an open conversation to convince them. Because I can tell you, maybe what I did in my generation was extreme, but today that will be norm. But when I look at where life is going, today there are industries that we never knew they existed before. So perhaps my own kids will come with things that I won't even imagine them as business, and they'll be telling me that they're doing business. So it's a mix that I think, even as a parent, it's a message that I believe the parents themselves needs to be open-minded in supporting and giving an environment for the kids to prosper, or the young adults who are trying to find themselves in this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, I can't remember where I read this from, but I remember reading, you know, getting back to like your mindset and how you were thinking, growing your businesses, that you're only as successful as your habits, right? So I wanted to ask you, what are 3 successful habits, or habits that lead to success, that a young person should adopt at a young age, that, you know, 20 years down the line they should maintain, that would kind of help them grow? You know, 3 key habits that you've implemented into your life.
Look, I think the key habits about anything to do with success has to be your commitment. You have to commit yourself that whatever cause you're putting yourself into, you commit to it first. And what will make that commitment see through will be the consistency, the level of consistency you put, and the passion you put behind what you're trying to achieve. And I think for me, if you have that, you'll probably be a very well-rounded, achieving person. Because in life, sometimes you have to wake up and do the same thing even when you don't see the results yet. In life, I always found, even with people that we hire, I always look for the most passionate. Because a person who's passionate about what they do, they never run out of steam. They're always ready to press on and keep on pushing. So it is that package of making sure that the commitment, the passion is there, and of course, to keep pushing, the person will be very consistent. Yeah.
That's extremely powerful. You know, especially what you said about you look for someone who's able to come back to the work and see a bigger paper load and still be passionate, you know, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You know, it's something really key, something really important. Be passionate about what you do. And that's kind of what will make it exciting on the daily. And in the same vein, I want to ask you, what are 3 unhealthy habits that young people should stay away from, especially in 2024, where basically comfort and like pleasure is like at your fingertips, you know? Yeah.
I'll say the enemy of progress, as I said, is procrastination, is idling, is comfort. So I would say the worst habits for someone to have is when they accomplish something, they sit on it and they marinate maybe for long. You know, they need to move to the next. So I would say the areas that I think a young person is also distraction. It's easy to get distracted. You get distracted by your own success. You know, because success gives you access to affording things, and that could be a distraction. It can throw you off. Now you didn't afford to go to certain places, now you can. You didn't afford to do certain things, now you can. And that actually takes you away from what you're supposed to be doing. So distraction is also a very critical thing that as a young person you must learn to fight it. Because actually I can safely say, especially when you come from a very less privileged environment and getting yourself to a privileged state, your enemy is yourself. Your biggest enemy is yourself, not anything else. Of course, part of it is the influence. The influence will come from friends. The influence will come from bad company you'll keep, which can derail you, totally take you out of your direction. You can have best goals, bad friends, equals to still bad decisions. So you know you have a deadline to meet, but friends are suggesting, let's go have fun. Let's take a drive. Let's and you're taken away from what you're supposed to be doing, and you're distracted. So the important part of being young is that you always have space to recover and build and learn. But the enemy, again, is yourself. Discipline, 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 I can say.
So how does one achieve more discipline in their daily life? Is it about like adopting, maybe gymming or something that grounds you, or how did you achieve discipline as a young person?
I think as a young person it's important to have a routine. Set your routines according to your priorities. And as a young person, never starve yourself of having fun, which is time out from whatever. Because it's important to understand you work, you play. As a young person, you have a lot of playtime you want to have. But if you don't restrict yourself and set it, it might actually be the other way around. You might end up playing more than working. So it's important to create a program for yourself. So it's never going to be one size fits all. It also depends what sort of work you do, what sort of industry you're at. I remember when we were young, running one of the early stage engineering firms back then, we had this motto, because we were young as a business. We will sit and work until 4 a.m. and we'll probably leave to sites at like 6 a.m. And in leaving for sites at 6 a.m. we're back by 11. Wow. 11 midday, have lunch, and we're done working for the day. And everybody didn't understand this work culture. These guys are not working. It's 12 o'clock, they are roaming around, they're chilled. But it was because we understood what we had to do and how to manage our time. So through the night, we're working. We're drafting documents, we're designing structures, we're doing so many things. That in the morning, it's time to just go visit the sites and see people are doing what we've designed, what we've planned. And the next day, half of that day is free for us to have our fun. So it goes as a young person to understand you are young, live your life as a young person, but also be able to adjust yourself in having your fun. Have your time out. As a young person, it's important.
You know, Uncle, something that's quite interesting as well, something that you actually quite touched on, is just the idea of the concept of making sure that what you do is something, A, that you're passionate about, so you can go back and be consistent with it. And number two, you stay disciplined, you have a routine, something you do on the daily, you know, every single day. And that kind of is what forms your habits, that what makes, you know, you successful. It forms you, it builds you. Something I remember reading here as well, because the reason why I asked about discipline is the power of saving. Saving is really important. Something I read here, I was reflecting on Proverbs 10, verse 5. He who gathers in the summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. ESV. Now, my dad always tells me about the importance of saving, how you should be somebody who collects, you know, just as Joseph did. He collected when it was bountiful, and when it became famine, he had a lot of grain, a lot of resources. How would someone young who isn't really as disciplined have some type of system to save their money? You know, should we save 10%, 20%, 30%? How should we kind of work with our money in that aspect?
Look, I'm not going to speak as an expert in this part, because I probably myself, I still have to fight myself to discipline myself better, because when you're in business, it's a bit different, I guess. But it's always important that you must always keep a backup plan in everything you do. It's always important. Practical, it might not always be practical, but you always have to try to have a discipline and a practice. So it's something that I would say, because when you're in business, you get to a place where you've got enough backup because you have assets, you have accumulated some level of wealth in different parts. That to keep money in the bank, it's a lazy investment. So for someone who's in business, it might be a bit different. You can save your investment by acquiring more assets, by leveraging yourself to get even more positions in wealth. But there'll always have to be a tailor-made plan that talks to your income structure, that talks to the line of income or business that you're in. For someone who's an employee, of course, I would say from your salary, you should not take your salary as is a happy day. Month end is a happy day. You should keep something for yourself in case you want someday to do something, or someday you lose a job, or someday something happens. You know, you never plan for that. But I would say when you're in business, equally is the same. It's not different. You have to try to build some reserves. You have to try to build some backup. But at least with business, you have more to work with, in the sense that if you have assets and you have multiple investments, I would only say in that space you probably have to try and keep some more liquid assets than a long-term assets to exit. You know, so don't keep all your value in assets that you cannot liquidate when you in need of cash. So the different principles of savings will always have to be tailored to your income structure. Yeah,
that's extremely powerful, actually, because I remember speaking with my dad about the idea of having, so basically keeping your money in the bank is great, it's really good, but a lot of like the wealthiest people don't necessarily only keep their money in the bank. There are multiple ways of storing your money. You can buy shares in certain companies. You can have a land bank, you know, buying land and keeping land in a very certain location. You can do certain things, you know, buy barrels of oil or whatever it is, and you don't have to physically keep it with you. So just certain things where you can save your money and make that a habit. If you're young, if you're out there, learn how to save. Saving is really important, especially saving an emergency fund, as you said. So something else that and I don't know if you noticed, audience, but we're in the finance section, the financial questions section now, is a lot of young people don't understand what a credit score is and how to have a good credit score. Because if you want to, for instance, get into real estate, you should have a good credit score, I guess. It's most of the time a good thing. So what is a credit score and why is it important?
Look, a credit score, I think, is what the banks use to benchmark if you're good enough for them to give you money. And of course, it differs from one state to the next, or from one bank to the other. But mostly it's governed country by country. There's credit score entities, Xperia, different companies that do similar things. So in South Africa, of course, there's a couple of companies also that do the same. That work out your credit score and would say you a healthy lend. You know, they can give money to you. The banks are good to give you money. So it's important to always look at how to maintain that, because that is always influenced by how you conduct yourself, how you honor whatever you've already borrowed or things that are debiting from your account. You make sure that you don't have any unreturned debits. Come month end, things have to be paid. Your account doesn't have enough. It will impact your credit score, and it will affect if the bank tomorrow you need them to give you maybe a mortgage or you want to finance anything. So it's I think it's a very important part of being in the active life of finance, that your credit score, you must always keep it as healthy as you can.
That's extremely important. You know, I think as a young person, developing finance skills is really important, really key. And something I noticed with me, my friends, the people around me, and young people I've interacted with, you know, and you just see it online, there's a huge frustration on just how expensive everything is becoming slowly but surely, and how even, you know, to buy, you know, the basic things you need, like bread or milk or whatever it is, it's becoming more and more expensive. And you hear if you check the news, you hear these words like inflation, right? So I guess the question is, what is inflation? Why are prices rising? And how can a young person kind of deal with the way things are going financially, economically, globally?
Look, again, inflation is also a matter that is measured country by country. Of course, there's global inflation benchmarks. But of course, the inflation has a lot of elements that are global impacts than local. So you know, we experienced COVID, which had a huge impact on supply chain. That has an impact on global inflation. We had the war in Russia, Ukraine. Now we have the Israel standoff. So these things are things of global nature, but have impact in our local environments, be it you in Europe or you in Africa or wherever in the world. You get impacted by things that have no direct origination in your environment. So inflation is just the rate of pricing change in a season or in a period. So if oil prices go up, it will have an impact on logistics, and it means whoever brings your food or cuts your goods have to increase their prices. That prices end up being the price on the shelf. The bread was a certain amount, now it has to go a percentage points, because now the cost of delivering this bread or moving the goods to make the bread is going high. So those are inflationary elements that no one has control of. No single human can say is shielded from inflation. But as a person, how do you protect yourself from that? That's the reason I think everyone should be an entrepreneur. Because there is a point in any income level that you can cushion yourself from inflation. The only way to cushion yourself from inflation is to earn more.
Wow.
So if you can't increase your rate of earnings and the rate of goods, you have no control how much it increases. it means whatever amount of money you have today is not worth what it was yesterday. So whatever you afforded yesterday, you are short tomorrow. So it will always be a phenomenon that if you have no control on your income, your expense line is going to grow and it's going to kill your affordability. So the inflation reality is that only entrepreneurs must, an entrepreneurial mind, not necessarily you have to be full-time entrepreneur. You could be in a job and have something that you do on the side that gives you extra income. It can help to manage the inflationary elements in your life.
You know, it's actually quite interesting to think about that. I have conversations like this with my friends all the time, and something that you touched on earlier was what you look for in a someone you want to hire, right? And everything's expensive. You want to find a job right after graduating. Just to go back on that, what else do you kind of look for in an employee, if someone you want to hire? Because there are a lot of people that are watching right now that have just graduated university and they're looking for a job. They want to make money in some way. What would you look for as an employer in an employee that you would hire immediately, besides passion?
Look, I think it's a lesson that I still continue to ask myself, because I've made many bad hires. And I think for me, because the hiring process and the way we conduct interviews, people sell themselves and they sell the best of themselves. The best hires I think we've had, or I've had in my life, are people that I've trained myself. That because I know those people are mostly more aligned and attuned to what we're trying to do and achieve. Many people who come to interviews, they come and sell themselves. So, and it's difficult to measure if the person is even passionate enough, is even dedicated enough, is even besides the academic qualifications that they match with your requirements. Mm-hmm. You have no way to sense check beyond that if the person is really, really good. So it's a very, very tricky part, and I can tell you many companies grapple with this, and even I at this stage, I mean, we've been probably hiring people for the past 20 years, but the reality is I can't say we've got it right. We do make wrong choices, but I would say for a young person, you need to sell yourself, but remember to sell yourself to what you realistically can do. Because, I mean, I've seen many recruitment processes. There is none that I've come across that can really give you the measure. How dedicated is this person? How committed is this person? How much will this person even go beyond the call of duty to achieve their goals, to achieve their targets? So the only thing you'll see is the recommendations, the reference points, but it's always going to be something you take a guess on the basis of what people present themselves as. So I would say also the young people must present themselves as best as they can, but they must learn to follow through, because a good or a bad hire depends on how much post now the interview process the person has been given the opportunity follows through, shows that dedication, shows that commitment, and really pulls through with the actions. Yeah.
That's really interesting. You know, you talk about the concept of pulling through. You know, proving yourself, showing what you are talking about, claiming. And something that's quite interesting as well that we spoke about earlier, and I'm going to link the two, is the fact that you don't want to ever, as a young person, you make a lot of money and lose yourself, right? And God will sometimes not give you everything that you may want, you know, the $1 million, the big house, whatever it is, because he doesn't want you to go out there and lose yourself and to just go further from him, right? And now linking this back to what you were just talking about, it's this idea that if you're going to fight for millions of dollars, if you want to make a lot of money, and if you feel like you've grounded yourself, you've grounded your character, if you're going to want to get a big job, follow through. If you want to make money and you want to get a successful business and you want God to bless you, you have to prove to him that, you know, I can handle it. You know, you have to prove to him that I won't go lose myself. Character-wise, I won't become prideful. I won't become lustful. I won't do this, and that. I'll find myself and I'll ground myself in prayer, like Uncle Lonwabo says. And that's very powerful. Another question I have for you, just to switch it up a bit. How did you make your first million?
Look, I don't even remember when I made my first million, actually. You know, it's actually an interesting thing to think about. But I believe I was still in Umtata at the time. I probably was still doing my engineering work and maybe some bit of property work at the time. That's when I made maybe my first million. It was through services. We were running an engineering services business, so advisory work and supporting local councils, provincial departments and private sector entities implement engineering projects. So that's where I probably cut my teeth and made a bit of my first millions. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what would you say, if you feel comfortable with sharing with us, what would you say is like some of the biggest, or let me say the top 3 biggest parts of your asset portfolio, biggest percentages of your asset portfolio right now?
We're currently sitting and exposed mostly in the real estate. And our second big exposure is probably telecoms and bureau mining. Mining we're doing, we've probably doing for the past 5 years. Mostly we're in the investment stage in most of our projects. So yeah, I would say that is our structure, but we have a lot of other services businesses that are supportive within our platform.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how could someone who wants to get into real estate for the first time as a beginner, how would they go about that? You know, maybe someone who's young, maybe 25, 26, they've built up a bit of a credit score with work or, you know, whatever it is. How would they be able to get into, begin real estate?
Look, there is no easy way for this. There is no easy way. Real estate is a equity game, is a wealth game. It's an investment game. Therefore, it means you must have money to invest. You must have equity to fund. You know, so I can't say at a young age it's easy. There is going to be any easy formula for that, except that you must have something that helps you have equity, access to equity, so that you can, through that, leverage with a level of debt to be able to acquire some assets. Of course, the mix of where to put your money will always depend country to country, which environment you're in. But I would safely say start small, learn as much as you can, because real estate is a very old age industry and remains probably one of the single class of assets that remains over time a safe haven for wealth. So it's definitely important that any investor have a play within the real estate environment. So learning about it, learning how it works would be the first place to start. But you have to try to have income generating or have access to cash or capital that will help you deploy some equity to be able to participate. Otherwise, you can only participate on the services industry within the real estate, which is also quite lucrative, because you can be in the real estate game, not necessarily owning, but also running services or even being an agent. That's actually a good way of starting to earn some money and understand more of the real estate. So you can start it from different parts, depending what is your real passion within the real estate sector.
Okay. So what would you say for all our real estate investors or aspiring real estate investors are the top 3 important things to look at when you're looking for a property?
Location, location, location. Nothing as bad as buying a bad asset, because to get out of a bad asset is difficult. So the only thing that I've been taught around property is to always invest in the right asset in the right location, because when you can buy an expensive asset, if it's in the best location, it will preserve your value. You buy very good assets, if it's in a bad location, you lose all your money. So location is everything.
Look at kind of like where your house is. You know, if you want to, for instance, buy a house, where your property is. You know, if it's close to school, if it's close to whatever it is, if it's for families, or if it's maybe just work, you know, and you want to work into offices, commercial real estate. Look at the location, you know, as Uncle Lonwabo says. Look at the comparables around you, the prices of the houses around you. Look at the area and all of that. And it brings me back to the idea of how you built your wealth off real estate, off mining, off things that are quite solid in the sense, you know, like quite traditional. Are you, as you know, someone who's built their wealth through that, are you skeptical with more of like the newer ways like crypto or like AI or so, like, are you like skeptical with that way of making money, or should people invest in, for instance, crypto or AI or whatever it is, or do you think people should just mainly invest more in like land or in mining, as you said, in gold and or in like physical hard commodities?
Look, I've not personally invested much in the crypto. I've played around with it, but I'm still, I can say, a rookie when it comes to understanding the fundamentals around it. They're still a bit fuzzy for me to get to fully understand. But it's nothing to ignore. It's definitely not anything to ignore. The future is no one else's knowledge, but how the markets will always gravitate to something. So I think the world is in search of new, always. Some news will disappear in no time. Some news will remain to become dominant. So you don't want to be left too far behind. So in saying that, I say I have some few crypto allocated interests, but not much, insignificant to anything we do. But it's just to play around to understand. It's not anything I can say it's a full investment approach. I always say I always want to understand the fundamentals before I even delve much into something. So AI and the rest are also things that I don't think they're gonna leave us anytime soon, but rather are gonna inform everything going forward. So in our business in the telecoms, fortunately, I even went to study more on machine learning, AI, a bit of analytics with Harvard last year, because I just wanted to understand and get more exposed to what this world of data is about. And I believe there's a lot of things that when you come out of such understanding, you then begin to say, look, the world is going to be a different place, and if I don't understand this knowledge, I might be left behind. And it's something that I would encourage everyone to try and expose themselves as much to those and learn. I'm not going to be a pessimist and say those industries are not going to go far. Yes, the regulators are still also trying to figure them out. That's what makes it difficult, because even if the regulators were fully understanding them, there's a lot of population that still has to learn more and understand. So it's an environment that I think all of us have to always strive to learn. I would say try and learn as much as you can.
Wow. You know, and just to close off this part of the section, the financial section, what would you say are some industries, whether it's in Africa specifically, because, you know, I'm South African and I love Africa, or just globally, what are some industries or whatever ventures or specific businesses that someone could start, or let me say industries that someone can go into that will be booming, or you predict will be booming, you know, going into the future in Africa or in wherever they are in the world?
Look, fortunately for Africa, we are still a net importer. So I believe for Africans, we should be looking to divorce the reliability of Africa from foreign nations. Of course, trade has to happen, but there are things we don't necessarily have to import that we can make ourselves back home, that are not so specialized, or rather not so much complex to do. I think part of it is because some of the African economies are not formalized. I would say we need to look at all the primary industries that are at the base industries to carry economies. So we have to look at investing in those service industries, perhaps second, but even primary as food, just basic food. If you look in many countries, we still import a lot of things. Fortunately, South Africa becomes a unique case in many instances, in that South Africa can be self-sufficient in many parts or in different parts of the economy. But I believe when you look at the rest of Africa, the picture starts being glaring on that there's lots that we can develop internally that we should be looking to build as those industries. So I would say it's a challenge to us as Africans. It is to make sure that the food that is on the table, we didn't import anything. When you go for lunch or dinners, everything we've made it in the country. It talks to our security, our sustainability, our own independence as different countries of Africa. So I would wish, in my own view, these engagements that are happening in different corridors in different parts of Africa, of creating these corridors of trade, can also regionalize and focus different things that can be manufactured by those economies to support other economies within the African context. I think if we can really progress with that, we'll do much.
That's really interesting. You know, there's this concept in business, and you kind of touched on it, on how, and I'm speaking to young people out there, if you see issues, if you see pain points, go and attack it. You know, Africa has a lot of pain points. Africa has a lot of things that are yet to be developed. As Uncle Lon was saying, the food we bring in, we import a lot of the time. The water we drink, you know, whether it's, or milk, you know, if it's less Nestle, you know, we import it, or the grain that we might have, sometimes it may be imported. And that doesn't really benefit us as Africans. And something that's quite interesting is in business, there's this concept of, if you see people rushing to gold or running to the mine, sell the shovels, you know, sell the pickaxes, get people excited as well. And we in Africa, we have a lot of history of exploitation, you know, people from outside coming to take, you know, whatever resources we have. And if we don't stand as young Africans and say, hey, we're going to control what's going on, we're going to make sure that our economy is boosted up, we're going to make sure that everything is done in the light, then we won't really have, you know, if we don't do that, we won't really have an Africa to stand for. And I guess this leads me to the next section of the interview, where we kind of speak about Africa. And I get this question a lot by my European friends that never really been to Africa or never really grew up here. And they see Africa from, you know, maybe documentaries or whatever it is. They see the worst parts. Why is Africa so, now I'm focusing on Africa because I'm African, that's my perspective, so poor in comparison to other countries, even though they have so many, we have so many more natural resources?
I think actually it's the reality that our history has not been very fair to us as Africans. But I think that there is time also to reflect beyond the history and say, Africa is not poor. Africa is full of opportunities. Africa is full of great things that we can do that can even teach the world.